Hello. Hello. Welcome to day 3 of Typographics, the design festival for people who use type. I'm Ellen Lupton. I'm a proud graduate of Cooper Union. The great people here at Cooper Union have produced this festival for 7 years now. And this year, Typographics is a truly global event with 10 guest curators sharing design perspectives from different parts of the world. Today's event is curated by Pegah Ahmadi, who has invited 3 designers from Central Asia to present their work today. Before I introduce Pegah, please enjoy these original animations created for the conference by our sponsors. The curator of today's session is designer and educator Pegah Ahmadi. Her experience extends across 3 continents, Asia, Europe, and North America. As a systems designer, she helps evolve the visual language and interaction principles at Grubhub by developing a cross-platform, cross-product design system. As an educator, she has taught typography, poster design, and digital media at the University of Illinois at Chicago, Başkent University in Turkey, and the University of Applied Science and Technology in Iran, where she received an Excellence in Teaching Award. Pegah earned her master's degree in graphic design from the Basel School of Design in Switzerland. Her work has been exhibited at the GDFS International Exhibition in Scotland, Icones in Switzerland, and Design Museum of Chicago. She has spoken at TypeCon and Typeforce, as well as right here at Typographics in the heady old days of 2019. So welcome back to Typographics. Pegah, where are you now?
Thanks, Ellen. Welcome, everyone. I'm speaking from Chicago. And first of all, I'd like to thank Typographics for giving me this incredible opportunity to curate and host the Central Asia section of the conference, more specifically focus on two countries, Turkey and Iran. There's so many talented designers and typographers from this region. The fantastic quality and quantity of body of work that the younger generation puts out, despite the limitations, is really fascinating. It always makes the teacher in me so happy and proud, but it definitely made the curation of this session hard, very hard. So I decided to define some limitations for myself to make the curation a little bit easier. I came up with two criteria. First, I wanted our speakers to have experience and lived in more than one culture or country. This was a personal choice, obviously. I'm very much interested in seeing the traces and confluences of different cultural elements that come through the designer's work intentionally and sometimes even unintentionally that create this unique quality. The second criteria was to cover a wide range of topics, from pragmatic and technical to more ideological, philosophical, and artistic representation of type. Okay, before I introduce our first speaker, I want to bring to our audience attention that you can ask questions using the Q&A feature in the bottom toolbar in Zoom. Please name the speaker before you ask questions so we know who the question is for and they can answer it. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Anıl Aykan. Anıl is a London-based graphic designer and educator, originally from Istanbul. She graduated from Graphic Design Department of Mimar Sinan Fine Arts University and completed her PhD at same university on typography. She was a teaching assistant and tutor in several universities in Istanbul. Since 2014, she has been working as a graphic designer at Barnbook in London. Her expertise is in editorial design, working with internationally renowned clients such as Victoria and Albert Museum, Phaidon, Rizzoli, Thames and Hudson, and Somerset House. She's also a member of a minimal electronic band called Fragile Self. Today, Anıl is going to explain the process that she went through to develop a new typeface for Turkish, and more generally, the essential methods required for creating a font in a specific language. All right, I'm thrilled to have you here, Anıl. Take it away.
Hi, thank you very much.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Very nice to see you. Okay. So, as Pegah said, I am Anıl. But actually, I am Anıl. I'm not saying, Pegah, you didn't pronounce it very well. You did so good job. But I want to emphasize that the dotless I is a unique letter of the Turkish language and Turkish alphabet. And this uniqueness is very much the subject of my talk today. As Pegah said, in the last 7 years, I have been living in London and working as a graphic designer at Barnbook Studio. If you don't know us, probably our most famous work is for David Bowie album covers, activist work with Adbusters, and we work a lot with museums and artists, so art and cultural institutions. So, hello again, the dot. I'm from Istanbul originally, and here you see the Fine Arts University where I did my PhD that this talk is based on. maybe I'm feeling a little bit homesick, so I couldn't travel there in the last, since the beginning of the pandemic. So I had to put this picture up here. So here is the title of my presentation today. I will talk about the process of designing a typeface for a specific language. But first, let me give you some background information. Following the collapse of Ottoman Empire, the Turkish Republic was founded by Atatürk almost 100 years ago. By reforming the social and political life of Turkish people, Atatürk created an independent, secular, and modern country. One of the most important reforms of him was the so-called alphabet revolution. In 1 year, the written script was changed from Arabic to Latin. Therefore, in Turkey, the Latin alphabet has only been used for 93 years. But the good typography is only possible when you have a proper understanding of both the letter forms and the language it represents. That's why, in my thesis, to facilitate more legible and readable continuous text, I researched the unique features of the language, and I designed a text typeface called Atatype, with a complete typographic system for text setting. So here is the complete font, but we will come to that in a bit. First, my starting point. Actually, this book, published by the Cooper Union and Herb Lublin Study Center, was my starting point. In it, there are 22 languages which are set using the same typographic parameters and content. That was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Very good choice, because you can find this declaration in every language in the world. So then these texts are visually compared and actually commented on such. Hungarian has a jazzy written, they say, and Italian has a visual advantage because it has harmony. And always it looks better than English. Yeah, very interesting book. I really enjoyed having it. But to understand the visual differences in the printed text further, I formulated 3 questions for my thesis. So 1, why are the printed visual textures different, even though it is the same content, same typographic parameters, of course, different languages, but why are the printed visual textures different? Why does Turkish look very different, very, very different? 3, is the same legibility and readability possible amongst all languages? A, with the same typeface, B, with the same typographic parameters. To answer these questions, I'm sorry, it will be a little bit like a typography lecture, but I know today, as well as individual designers or people who are interested in typography, also classrooms are watching us. I hope this will be useful in some ways for them. So to answer these questions, I investigated them within typography terminology. Typography can be divided into 2 sections, macro and micro typography. So this talk is on micro typography parameters, which is important for setting a legible and readable continuous text. And we know these parameters here evolved uniquely for Latin script. It is different for non-Latin scripts. Also, some of these parameters were invented much later in the process alongside the Latin language. For example, word space. Here we see a list of languages which are written with Latin script. Immediately we see they have different origins and linguistic features, but they all follow the Western rules. For a fine typography though, language should be also considered within the microtypographic parameters. Why? Because orthography alphabet range, frequently used letters, frequently used letter groupings, average word length, they all vary amongst those languages. So first, let's have a look at the alphabet range. So classical Latin alphabet is 23 letters. English alphabet is 26. And Turkish alphabet is much bigger with 29 letters. We can say that a smaller alphabet has an advantage because as the limited number of elements and their frequent repetition provide a stronger harmony. Let me explain why. The most frequently used 6 letters constitute 65% of any language corpus. So amazing, 6 letter, 65 of any language. So the most frequently used first 12 letters constitute 80%. In Turkish, what happens? The remaining 17 letters make up only 20% of the text. So the result is that these letters are inconsistently distributed in the text, like almost peppered in the text. Here we have an example, but very extreme example. On the right side, we see the Hawaiian. It has only 12 letters in the alphabet. So we can compare these both languages in this way. So the most frequently used letters also vary from language to language. For example, these are the first most frequently used 12 letters in Turkish. And when we look at Portuguese, it has a slightly different set. However, the total impact of these 4 different letters becomes more prominent in text setting. So before I started designing the typeface, I actually analyzed the form of the most frequently used letters in Turkish more in detail. So taking into account of the usage percentages, I compared Turkish with other 9 languages. And I found out that almost half of the letters in Turkish texts are narrow. And secondly, Turkish had the least amount of counter space amongst the 10 languages. Here I am showing only 3 of these languages. Thirdly, the vertical stroke usage in comparison to the round strokes was the highest in Turkish. Finally, the ascender and descender usage is also more frequent in Turkish. This last outcome was also confirmed with the computer program me and my colleagues wrote. We scanned the whole text to find out the blackness ratio of the X height to the whole area for the 10 languages and in 2 typefaces to make sure, because typefaces have, different features. Because of the ascenders and descenders, also diacritical marks in Turkish, the X height emphasis was least strong in Turkish in comparison to other languages. So here are the findings. Because of the narrow letters, I detected some possible legibility issues in Turkish. High vertical emphasis in the text. The horizontal emphasis is not supported well. There is a monotonous black and white space in the text and limited inner text space. So, data-type. Because of these findings, my first intention was to increase the counter space of the letters. We know big counters create more legible letters. In order to achieve this, increasing the X height is a common practice. But instead of increasing the X height, I extended the letters horizontally, as we see here. And the sharp corners on the arches and the outstroke-like serifs on the right leg of N, M, and H help to create bigger counters. So, and these are then applied to other related letters, of course. Abstract terminals are also ideal to create open apertures, preventing letters to be perceived as a closed form. This open aperture feature with the abstract terminals was also applied to the letter E in a different way. And also, as I said, other letters. So, two of the most frequently used letters in Turkish are also K and Y. They appear less in other European languages, and sometimes they don't exist in few others. But in Turkish, they can be seen as the most distinctive characters. Therefore, of course, special attention was paid to their use and aesthetic in Atatype. The leg of the K and the tail of the Y were designed with a rustic style in harmony with the outstrokes of A, U, and D, and the right leg serifs of the M, N, and H. So the letter groupings. Frequently used letters can be common between languages. At the end of the day, there are, a certain set of letters in Latin alphabet. But however, letter groupings are unique for each languages. We can see this with this example. Here we compare most frequently used letters in English and Turkish. 66% of these letters are common. But if we look at the most commonly used pairs, similarity ratio dropped to 47. When the triple letter groupings are compared, the common letters are only 4%. Looking at this, we can say all languages have their unique letter combinations and word motifs. This chart here shows at what frequency a letter contacts another letter in Turkish. So I looked into this contact motif, and in these groups, I selected the pairs which can create legibility problems when text is very small or printed or spaced badly. For example, when the R and dotless I come together, they may be mistaken for N, or L and dotless I with the H, N and dotless I with M. So to prevent these legibility issues, I modified some features of the typeface. So normally the terminal of the R follows the terminal of the A and S. Because of the problem I mentioned, I strengthened the terminal of the R, so it became more visible, as this part of the letter is most important for identification. So, and additionally, the serifs of the right leg of the N is different from that of the bottom of the dotless I. Other problematic letter groupings we saw for legibility are the L and dotless I and N and dotless I. To prevent this confusion, the angle and the shape of the head serifs are modified. So in Turkish, there are grammar rules which define the letter groupings in Turkish. So the words are shaped in a particular pattern, and this is not always visually harmonious. I want to give you an example. When the word happiness is felicità, sounds nice, felicità in Italian, in Turkish, it is mutluluk. The word is already formed with one of the vowel rules. When we generate the word as my happiness, it becomes mutluluğum because of these grammar rules. And of my happiness, the result is a very monotonous word pattern. So in Atatype, I aim to break these monotonous patterns in words. With the substantial shoulders, we join the branches and vowels firmly to their stems. And with the diagonal axis and visible shape of the serifs in the right legs of the N, M, and H helps distribute the color more evenly in both vertical but horizontal directions. So talking about the letter groups, what comes to the mind? Of course, the ligatures. In Turkish, F and I ligature creates a problem, though. It is often mistaken for the F and dotless I pairs. So that's why in Atatype, rather than designing an F and I ligature, the hook of the F was shortened so it doesn't clash with the I. And the letter pairs, FL, FK, and FB, are still designed as ligatures because they are necessary in Turkish. And also in Turkish, the apostrophe usage is frequent. The apostrophe is used with proper nouns when they have a suffix, as we see here. In response to the frequent use of apostrophe, I designed an experimental ligature set. And of course, the letter groups are important when it comes to the kerning. We all love kerning. As the most frequently used letter pairs are different in each language, the kerning table should be customized. So, shown here are the important letter pairs in Turkish, which are usually not in the standard kerning tables. So, the kerning table of Atatype is extended to include these pairs. Before proceeding to the last part of my talk, I would like to also mention the diacritical marks. So in Turkish, letters with diacritics change the meaning of the words. For example, turning the bend, the bay came into view. With an umlaut, the meaning changed to village. There are more naughty examples for this, but I didn't want to show them here in this lecture. So that's why it is crucial to design the diacritics properly, not as accessories or kind of, decoration, but as integral parts of the letters. Additionally, the frequent usage of the diacritical marks fills up the space between the lines. So, of course, for Atatype, I designed the diacritical marks for optimum legibility and readability. So their weight, size, position, shape are very much in harmony with the base glyphs. Here we see a sentence, which is also a pangram, which has the whole Turkish alphabet, including the letters with the diacritics. Finally, the word length. Word length has an impact on the eye movements of the eye when reading. Long words create long movements. We call them saccadic movements. So every letter added to a word decreases the reading performance by 3.3%. So in English, average word length is 5 letters. In Turkish, it is 6.2, which is 20% more than English. So the words are long in Turkish. Here we see an example. Why? Because of the suffixes. There can be 10 suffixes in a single word. The word shape is important for reading because we detect word shapes as well as individual letters of the features of the letters. So word shape even more important for the longer words. That's why for Atatype, I accentuated the word shapes, which is mainly formed with the ascenders and descenders. So this is another reason why in Atatype, I kept the X height in normal size. I didn't increase it. Not to lose the word shape and allow space for the diacritical marks. So in this way, I achieved better word shapes. So lastly, I want to emphasize that axis, modulation, stem serif, head serifs, outstrokes, and terminals were all designed to support the horizontal reading movement in text, because it is for reading very important. Also, as I said in the beginning, I proposed some typographic parameters for Turkish typesetting. So to test the font and these suggestions, I typeset 2 books in Turkish in order to compare. Here you see the existing book, and there is the book retyped with Atatype and revised typographic parameters. Atatype was also used in Slanted Magazine's Istanbul issue. some of the German and English articles are set in Atatype. Actually, I think this illustrates very well, like any good typeface, Atatype works well in other languages, even though it was designed particularly Turkish language in mind. And here I am with Atatürk shaking his hand. So this is a statue in my neighborhood in Istanbul commemorating alphabet revolution. So on that note, I want to thank you all for watching.
Thank you, Anıl. That was
Thank you.
fascinating and
Thank
very
you.
insightful to see your research process and the questions you ask to guide it along the way. The result is very beautiful and much more legible. It was great.
I just hope it wasn't boring. I mean,
no, it was definitely very interesting for myself. I can speak for myself. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we learned that Atatype is a contemporary typeface designed specifically for Turkish language. Can you tell us a little bit about the cultural and historical references that you interpreted in order to design a contemporary typeface? Also, we want to know the story behind the name, Atatype.
Yes, actually, I tried to show the story behind the name on a slide. It comes from Atatürk and Typeface. It's a blend. So it became Atatype. But also, Atatürk means a father in Turkish. Like, so I just maybe wanted to emphasize the fact that this is the first typeface done, you know, researching the Turkish language, etc. So I wanted to say Atatype. So yeah, I mean, this is a tricky question. I think when you design a text typeface, because Atatype is the text typeface, and you know the classical Latin script has evolved in so many years, centuries, and the people have familiarity to these letters. So I really avoid doing anything superficial or decorative. You know, because when you want to include some cultural references, I think it is a difficulty there. You might make it really decorative. So I avoided this definitely because it had to be legible and readable first. Also, I wanted to follow the tradition of, you know, long Latin script. But having said that, of course, I looked at the scripts which was used Turkish language. For example, Orkun inscriptions, the kind of letters carved onto a stone. So these letters there, because they were carved on a stone, sharp, simple, cornered. So kind of research a little bit about them. But of course, the Ottoman alphabet based on Arabic script was a big influence. It can be seen easily on the diamond-shaped dot of Atatype or the leg, you know, outstroke like serifs of some of the letters. You can see that. Also, it's interesting. The 1920s printing techniques became my influence because after the First World War, there was a paper shortage and printing techniques wasn't very good. So the letters there had to be really bold, simple, and robust without having any intricate details. So this project fully was an homage to that era, to be honest. So I think 1920s printing technology conditions was one of my important inspiration.
Thank you for explaining that. So one of the questions we received from the audience, Mary Kalmnas, sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. So what was the most difficult part of designing the font for you?
All process was difficult, to be honest. I mean, type design is a highly skilled job. And I think also requires dedication. I don't believe type design can be a side project. And it requires a lot of antisocial hours. You know, you have to sit down and work hours and hours, print them again and again, etc. And you know, types, letters, they can be quite small, and you know, it is. I think being antisocial and had to be in front of my computer was the most difficult part. But I can easily say the whole process wasn't easy. No.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. There's another good question that was actually a question of mine too, from the same person. They're saying Atatab is a smart name, I think, very clear where it originates. Do you have a new font in the pipeline? And is it also based on setting readable text, or is it more extrovert?
I wish I had more type projects, but as I said, I am aiming at the moment to revise and finish Atatype, and also I want to edit to other sets, such as Italic. Is very important for me, because also recently I have been in touch with a newly formed publishing house in Turkey. They want to use Atatype in their books. So really my first goal in short term is to revise and add different sets to Atatype. But when I do graphic design projects, I like working with letter forms. It can be, you know, a new logo type or a book cover. So I kind of, I like working with letter forms and designing new ones. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, that was great. Anil, thank you so much for presenting, and like we learned so much from your project. And there are other questions in Q&A. If you get a chance, please, if you wanted to, you can respond there. So with that, I want to thank you again, and I'm personally going to follow your work. I'm very much interested, and thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you, Pegah, for your invitation, and for Alexander, of course, and the technical team, amazing technical team behind this.
Definitely
I
amazing.
want to thank you
I'm
all
impressed
for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk about this topic today at Typographics. It has been an honor and pleasure.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Okay, so before we get to the next speaker, I'd like to remind all the attendees again that you can ask questions using Q&A feature at the bottom toolbar in Zoom. And please name the speaker before you ask the question, so we know who the question is for and they can answer it. All right, so the next speaker is Golnar Rahmani. Born and raised in Iran, living and working in Berlin, Golnar runs the studio Rahmani. The studio specializes in typography, type design, and visual identity, featuring a strong expertise in multilingual typography with a focus on Persian Arabic type. The recent project, Type and Politics, aims at freeing Arabic and Persian type from its ideological connotation. Welcome, Golnar. Please take it away.
Hi. Thank you for
Hello.
introducing me, Pegah.
It's great having you here.
Thank you. I go fast to the talk because of the time limitation, of course.
No problem.
And we'll chat at the end again.
Okay.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Golnar, as you heard. Today I want to talk about an initiative project of mine, the Type and Politics. I started in 2018. It is an educational activism project. Of course, I have to go to my screen. It's an educational activism project I started in 2018. Type and Politics is an attempts to depoliticizing the Perso-Arabic type by removing the ideological and the negative connotations from it for a more comfortable, diverse society to live in. Nowadays, in European daily life, seeing Perso-Arabic type on a card, a book, or a graphic without the following picture remind most of the people of politics, especially the stressful ones. Aggression, religious content, which in this case, the extreme radical Islamic content is it. What is here obvious is there's nothing positive to find. Unlike other non-Latin letters or alphabet, Perso-Arabic type doesn't appear exotic, but rather create bad feelings and marginalize its cultural value. Here, for example, the text in Japanese, as you see, or for the foreigners who can't read it, no one won't remind of any political conflicts or any religious content. Also, for this text in Devanagari, which is one of the Indian scripts.
Hey, Golnar, we don't see your slides. Can you share the screen?
I shared.
We're not seeing, so just take your time and let's.
Oh my God, sorry guys.
No worries.
So here it is. Oh my God, I have to go through all this again.
We see them now, thank you.
So here again, about the Arabic types. By seeing this, we mostly remind of the people here of the politics, especially the stressful ones, and then aggression or the very radical Islamic content. Unlike other non-Latin texts, as here in Japanese, you see, the Perso-Arabic type doesn't appear exotic, but rather creates bad feelings and marginalize its cultural value. In Japanese, no one won't remind of any conflicts or religious content. Also for the Devanagari, an Indian script, the people mostly think about the sun, the colors, delicious food, or the Bollywood, of course. Although India is very famous as a land of thousand religions, nobody would remind of the religion things. So what causes these negativities and how this can happen? Causes lie behind this matters have nothing to do with the letters as an abstract writing system, but our experiences and knowledge about it. Here I count some of them, like the very fast growing Islamophobia during the last 2-3 decades, the confrontations of the different political interests inside the Middle East, also conflicts between the world politics and the Middle Easterns. The huge mistakes and mismanagement in plans of the world politics in Middle East, and this oh my God, it's quite okay, and the sponsored terror organizations inside and outside of the Middle East are all on the one side, and we should consider that more than ever our perceptions, our opinions are under the influence of social, political, and cultural changes. By that, we will see that the keywords we hear daily by any news we hear related to Middle East or the Islam are like the Islamic terrorism, political instabilities, wars in Middle East, religion conflicts, and so on. So these both keep the situation emotionalized, and continuity of this getting more and more visible as a different form of the discrimination, society's plights, hate potentials, and about the subject Islam, especially in Europe and in North America. Of course, getting constantly bombed by such pictures and news affect us psychologically. Like our self-protection machine will tries and reminds to ignore or keep the distance from such things to protect us mentally. So along through these two matters, the Islamophobia and the daily news, without any other direct negative experience we had, makes us anxious and triggered by anything related to the Middle East, like the people, the cultures, languages, religions, and so on, and recognize them as a conflict and a problematic factor, which is unrealistic and not true. So this kind of processes, reacts of our brains, shows us the ways of how propaganda works. The propaganda is only successful if in a society there's not enough knowledge about something, which here in Middle East is the case. So on one side, we hear these all heavy, horrible pictures or the daily news and words about the Middle East. And then if we want to ignore this and think about what we know else, mostly in our mind library, we go to the Orientalism subjects, like as which is also another factor made during the centuries in Europe, gave the people here a very wrong generalized picture of the region. For example, this belly dance, or the picture of the women, the men, the sultans should be everybody, or the Sahara as a fact. So as you see, the Orientalism is very generalized and kind of discriminating and unrealistic, because not only belly dance is the only dance you can find in the region in Middle East, there are several other cultural differences and dances, and of course, much more than I showed. In Orientalism, we hear most of the time, like in the Middle East, they have there's a picture of a Middle East as a whole desert, which the people are traveling by camel inside. Here is in the heart of the Middle East, somewhere in Tehran. As you see, there snows on the mountains, and in the city, here is the Damascus in the night. Also, we know, but this picture from Damascus, we see daily, but the reality is this also is a Damascus at the same time. But also this is from Syria, the picture, or this is such a countryside from the north of Iran, goes to the sea, Caspian Sea. Another thing of Orientalism, the women picture, which here you see much more realistic picture of the women you can find in the Middle East. So as you see, or we saw through these few pictures, is very obvious that our information are too little to resist the propagandas. If it gets much worse if we come to the subject of type. So most of the people here in Europe, surprisingly, a significant number of graphic designers even, think that the Arabic type, sorry, I missed one part. Of course, this is not all about the Middle East. There's a lot of other parts of the Middle East I can't show through these slides, but as a sample, there is a huge heritage of calligraphy and editorial designs and paintings, which I gathered a few of them here, as you can see, mostly from Iran, of course. As you see, there are paintings of the women's articles. There are colors and so many texts and masterpieces done there. The lovers about some centuries ago, and masterpieces also from the typography done on the surfaces. Editorial designs, much more really great calligraphical and editorial designs. And I'm fascinated of this part as this infographical or typographical layouts, especially here, the infographics, very ancient one. And of course, much more than I showed you. Even in 18th centuries, the women who were dancing on the hands. New approach in the modern time for the types used for the plastic sculptures, and a lot of other aspects of typography in different scenes of cultures, also in the modern graphic design are to see. As you considered, even through these few pictures, we see how it can be delighted, or how it can help us to help our brain library a bit to have some other sides from the Middle East, or at least in this case of the visual words. And by that, I want to go to the back to the Arabic type, which I started to say that most of the people here, they think that the Arabic type is a type that is from the Arabs, or for the Arabs, which they use for the Arabic language. It feels like if we say the Latin type is for the Latin people, and with this, we write only in Latin language, and clear is not true. The same is for the Arabic type. There are some points I would go through to realize, to have the better feeling of it. We have to mention, like, there are over 900 million of users of the Arabic type all around the world. Officially, they use these alphabets. There are several other languages that are not Arabic, but using these Arabic letters as their official languages. In all these countries, they use the Arabic types. And by that, I want to show you how big is this amount. Beside this, I have to mention that, or we should know that not anybody use Arabic type is necessarily a Muslim. The same is for the Christians. So it's really hard to imagine if it would be like this. Also, there are many other cultures than the Arab cultures in the region. Here is a picture of the Arab countries, which were mostly, it's not my picture and it's not about the type and sector. I just took it from the internet. But I wanted to show on the card, on the map, how big and different is the countries. Even the Arab countries is a kind of Orientalism word, because from the Syria and the top, and Iraq, until the much more further in the south, until the other side of the Africa continent to Morocco. There are many countries with much different cultures and dances and foods and music and their history and civilization. So even the Arabic language they speak are not the same. Here, again, I wanted to show how worldwide, there are virtually Muslim countries, which all in one thing they have a mutual type interest, which is the Quran, the Holy Quran. It's written in Arabic. So why discriminating a type is important. Type is a writing system tool. So as an abstract writing system tool, and that shouldn't be discriminated or politically valued, especially negative. It has to treat it neutral. Also, type is a culture good, which is related to many aspects of our lives in the society. Anywhere, anything we write, we are in the direct contact with it. So if a type gets discriminated, the content it's written with will too. Also, the people who has a connections or read this content, they're discriminating too as well. So as you can continue this chain very fast to get to the other related things like culture, literature, religion, and so on. As it goes very fast and everything kind of goes discriminated by this. I've been busy for years about this subject, and finally in 2018 I could achieve to concept this project and start the Type and Politics. There I try to work on new visuals to, instead of seeing such negative and problematic treating pictures, to produce more funny, charming, childish, exotic, new look of this type and bringing them out into the society. So to be simple, instead of remembering this kind of associations to the Arabic type, we will see such things more, to have the others, to see some other sides of it. So I started and organized the workshops for those who were interested, and because for learning and understanding principles of Arabic type and creating graphics with experimental way for the adding joy and curiosity and aesthetics. So I thought the more we can make kind of those graphics, the more will people save and remember this kind of visuals related to the Arabic type the next time. So as you see, these are some graphics that people, they can at least read some words, and they made really great graphics and took them with to the society with a really totally new looks. Like that. Yeah, by working on that, I established a platform called Curated Berlin, and there, parallel to workshops, I started to do other concepts all in Persian typography, printing them in silk screen print on different materials, and also made an fashion collection, which is the last collection of this label was Namak Safar, which means the taste of the journey. It was presented last February in Berlin, and that was about the distances. It was also for supporting the Type and Politics, and it was about the cities where the Arabic type comes from, and from the Middle East, and the distances from there to Berlin. So the names of the cities and the distances in kilometers, they're in the shape of the graphics and the different outfits. And it's made for the people here to have the joy, blessed of seeing the familiar names of the home cities and hometowns on the streets, not related to any political or wars or bomb or Islamism in some kinds, but a new look and a very fresh. Also for those who are not familiar to this, and alphabet too, for joining different worlds through a mutual interest in typography. Thank you. Sorry for the beginning.
Golnar, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And also thank you for accepting to talk today. I know English is
Thank
actually
you
your
from my
third
side
language. You speak
for
like
inviting.
German is your second language, right? Very impressive. Thank you.
No,
I love
I
that
guess the second or third, I'm not
Sorry,
sure anymore, but it's okay. Yeah.
Great work. I love
But
that you
thank you for your
incorporated type
patience. I hope
into.
it wasn't that much disturbing in the beginning that I
Oh
just talked
no.
for
That's
me and
very.
nothing.
We are
Yeah.
used to it, especially this year. You know, everyone I think is used to this little hiccups. So I just was like, I was gonna say, I love that you incorporated type into everyday objects and especially clothing and brought it to fashion. And the more you see Arabic type or Persian type, that kind of context, it makes it more familiar and less threatening, or like it wouldn't be, you wouldn't feel the fear of the unknown, basically,
Yeah.
which is actually big part of it. Just
Yeah.
because you don't know, or you've seen, the example that you were showing in media, and you
Yeah.
rarely see the good and positive examples.
Yeah.
So with that, I also wanted to ask you a question that I wanted to know, what was that moment, or if there was a defining moment that you got inspired to do this type and politics project? Were you personally impacted by unconscious bias at all? Like, I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, of course. And strangely, it was like, so to me, it was totally a shocking moment as I realize it, because it doesn't come just by a sudden. So it was like I was quite new here in Berlin, and I was sitting in a subway and reading a book written in Persian, and although it was covered from the cover, nobody could see, but from the inside, I considered somebody would sit beside me, were kind of unsure, look at me in such a way, in the way like, what's wrong with her? But that time I wasn't that sure if it's because I look strange to him or it's some other interests. But through the time, I took this book by purpose, or maybe my cell phone, to chat in Farsi or Persian. And I considered that indeed the people cannot connect me to Islam or to any religious content, because I do not carry any Islamic form. To me, it was also very shocking, because I never thought that the Islamophobia, or this kind of fear of Islam or Islamism can happen to me, because I never thought that. So I'm an atheist. I didn't have any connections to that, in my opinion, but I had. So the type was the bridge,
The connection, the
yeah.
bridge, yeah.
And from there, that was the aha moment that I thought,
see.
oh God, that even through the type, they know I'm from somewhere else.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely had some of those moments personally too.
You too.
Especially in the train, like looking at my text if it's in Persian.
Yeah, I hear also here and there from different people. I mean, then after, as I start to talk about this, and for the very first time, to thematize this subject as a factor or as an element of discrimination, I heard a lot of stories. Yeah,
I can totally see. So how was the second question? How was type and politics received in Europe? Do you think it was successful? What does success look like to you, even?
to me, alone to start this and to get invited by such great conferences or anywhere I can talk about this concept, as I said, is a very, very new aspect of seeing this issue, to me is a success. So as soon as I can talk to the audience, it would be a great thing. But I had a lot, and really the people were really kind. I had a lot of great feedbacks from the people. So as you saw in the pictures, there were people who didn't understand, didn't know anything about the Arabic type, or quite anything. And they were mostly the students in the design branches, which they were amazed, and they were really happy because they could understand the type systems. So I go through the workshops, like I define and I introduce the Arabic letters and the system of writing systems and all the expertise that you need to type something with it. And they were really happy. They can at least now write some words in Arabic or Persian, and they can read these few graphics that they made. And they bring this stuff out there into the society, and it brings this chain to the communication to the next one. So as it started, yeah. I'm happy. I guess I'm happy enough with
you also have some fans, they're asking questions, so you can, after this, you can, if you're interested, you can answer the questions in the Q&A, please. Great, thank you so much, Golnar. That was awesome.
That was great having me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, before we go on to our next presenter, we would like to share with you a few short typographics animations made by our sponsors, specifically for this year's conference. We will have Pouya, Golnar, and Elham present right after this. Enjoy.
And he wakes up and his arm is doing the thing it's kind of glowing whenever he turns it on. So I think he finally unlocked 100%.
All right, I'd like to introduce our next speakers. First, Pouya. Pouya is a designer with an interest in exploring typographic manifestations of hybrid and transnational identities. Pouya's work has been featured internationally in exhibition, publication, and design blogs, including Graphic Design Festival Scotland, Golden Bee International Design Biennial, Dubai Design Week, and many more. He edits and designs Amalgam, a graphic design journal that explores the intersections of typography, language, and visual art. The next speaker in this section is Golnar Adili. Golnar is a mixed media artist with a focus on diasporic identity. She holds a master's degree in architecture from the University of Michigan and has attended residencies at a Rockefeller Foundation for the Arts in Bellagio, Italy, and Macmillan in Brooklyn, among others. Some of the venues Adili has shown her work includes Craft and Folk Art Museum in LA, Q Art Foundation, and International Print Center in NYC. Adili will be exhibiting her work at the Victoria Albert Museum at Jamil Prize finalist this fall. The last speaker of this section is Elham Namvar. Elham is a graphic designer and design researcher based in Dubai, UAE. Departing from practice in editorial, visual identity, and experiential design, her work now employs a multidisciplinary approach, weaving together design, research, and critical thinking. Currently, her exploration involves inquiring methodologies of archiving and taxonomies of knowledge. She holds a dual degree of International Master of Design in Graphic Design from the University of Illinois and the Basel School of Design. Okay, welcome all. Pouya, please take it away.
Okay, thanks, Pegah. Thanks, Typographics, for having me. I'm gonna jump in. Okay. All right. Phrase "Zabane bi zabani" in Farsi refers to a form of tacit language that's associated with silent or indirect response. It's often used to describe the method through which someone, usually the subaltern, would express their position and challenges. The power of this language, however, lies in its ability to repurpose and subvert the mundane and seemingly insignificant into a critique of what represents the impenetrable, established, and unchangeable set of conditions. The word zaban itself in Farsi stands for both language and tongue. The relationship between these two words is important, as one, tongue, referring to the material form of the other, language, is known to be one of the most critical components of the anatomy of speech. Vowels, one of the two main categories of speech sounds, are typically grouped based on their tongue position, height, tension, and whether the lips are around it. In the case of the consonants as well, the tongue is responsible for much of the complete or partial blocking of the airstream, which produces the very sounds themselves. One could argue that the inherent dichotomy of the phrase "zabane bi zabani" and the very language it utilizes to formulate its mode of criticism renders frivolous, or possibly what is referred to as "asamun beri ismun baftan," meaning connecting two rhyming but unrelated words or topics. It's exactly under such contradictory regimes that this form of subversion gains its power. Its ambiguity, elusiveness, incoherence, and multitude of directions form a constellation which allows for infinite interpretations and refusal of conforming or decoding, hence reclaiming its position again. Zaban, the mechanical force behind all languages, assumes the hovering gaze of the third issue of Amalgam. It will twirl and toss, bend forward and backward, and reverberate, all which appears incoherent and incommensurable. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to the two contributors of this current issue of Amalgam Journal, Golnar Adili, who is the artist based in New York, and after her, Elham Namvar, who is a designer and researcher based in to buy.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's a total pleasure to be a part of this. I'm a mixed media artist right now in New York. And thank you so much, Pouya and Pegah and Typographics, especially Pouya, who included me in this wonderful publication. So I'm just going to jump right in and screen share since we have very little time. And I have a lot of visuals and a lot to say. So let's go to full screen. I am trained as an architect. I'm a mixed media artist, and I'm fascinated by language. I started doing art as a way to heal and process my past full of separation. And in poetry, I found my voice because there's a lot of Persian poetry, and Persian poetry being the backbone of Persian culture, that expresses longing. So I found that voice in there, and I started to process it. And like anything else, and informed by my background in architecture, I started to deconstruct and reconstruct. Initially, I'm gravitating towards Hafiz a lot because he's very shrewd with handling language. And there's one particular poem that kind of was my opening into language, which is Saman Buyan. And here I have written the first stanza, Saman Buyan Ghabar Gham Cho Benshinan Benshanan. So he uses the verbs very shrewdly. And sometimes they're identical, and sometimes they're very different, sometimes they're very similar. And so he's playing with content and form as poets do. And as a visual person, I wanted to look at that. So here I'm taking Benshinan and Benshanan at the very end of the left part, because we're going from right to left, and started to form, like to crisscross them to look at their forms, because they're only different by one ah. Then the meaning of the poem is, as the jasmine scented ones near, they settle the dust of sadness. So as they sit themselves, they sit down the dust of sadness. So Benshinan and Benshanan. And so here I've silk screened Benshanan on 4 layers of tissue paper, of lens paper, and kind of staggered them to convey this dust-like look. This is Benshinan, so you see the similarities between the two. It's only an ah different. This is how it's layered. Then I move on to the next verb, which is they quarrel, bestizan, and I'm very interested in pattern. I designed this typography because I'm not interested in calligraphy, and being an architect, I'm very interested in just simple pixels. And so that was the most fundamental way to look at text and language for me. Barbandan is they quarrel. So it's kind of entangled here. And I just want to draw your attention to the edges. They're formed just because of the shape of the letters and how they're interlocked. And so I also enjoyed that kind of serial, and there was no control on the edges kind of thing. This is a close-up. This is the silk screen process, which was really fun to do. And then I had access, being someone who loves material, I had access to a 3D printer, and I kind of went down with it, and I took that 2D drawing, initial drawing, and I kind of made it into a landscape, showing the compression and tension. And it reminded me of a Buckminster Fuller's quote, tension is the great integrity. And I was like, in this fully packed poem, there's a lot of tension, and I just would love to look at that. This is, I work with wooden cubes, and I started to build the 2 words, Benshinan and Benshanan, and again, you can see them. Then I was tickled to make the whole 14 verb sets, pairs, and then I was like, what if you made it really big and you can walk in the poem? Here I'm showing you how I kind of looked at, because I also do archival work with my late father's writing. So I looked to design my own pixelated, very simple type. I was looking at his handwriting, and this is kind of how I was investigating that. Then I went to make the whole alphabet set. And from there, I'm also dabbling in book arts. I thought to make it more specific from the alphabet. And I said, the first thing that came to my mind was Baba Abdad. which is the first sentence that Persian students learn in first grade. Father gave water, which I feel like thematically like tie into many of the people who presented earlier, whose presentations I loved. Thank you for creating that context. It's very refreshing as someone who lives in an English speaking world to have that kind of context. Anyway, so this is inspired also by my daughter, who's a toddler, and as a bilingual mother, wanting to teach her Farsi, I think about tactility and learning and language, and kind of placing them in where they belong. And again, going back to someone who loves language and material at the same time, I'm going to just finish my section with a curtain I made with Bestizan, which is again back to Hafiz's poem. This is 2 layers of silk screen on silk. And with that, I would like to turn it to Elham.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thanks, Typographics, and Pegah for the curation, and Pouya, really thank you for including me and Golnar as part of your talk. What I want to talk about today is an ongoing research project that I have started as part of my thesis. It's called The Library: Alternative Ways of Organizing Knowledge. And it's a research project, like I said, that aims to uncover the potential of libraries and its attempt to provide an alternative visualization of knowledge taxonomy. It also explores ways in which we archive knowledge and how it affects our culture or universal conventions. Even though libraries have a long history of overcoming geographic, political, cultural boundaries by storing and collecting an image of collective memory, but this act of conserving and archiving knowledge usually requires a specific system of organization. And when it's followed by a universal set of rules, it often resembles very conventional and rigid system of organization, which usually hands sense of discovery and element of surprise. So I was very interested to research about what happens when the image on the left becomes as organized as the image on the right, but also more importantly, what gets lost in the transition of the organization. So the objectives, of course, like I said, were to examine how these different methods of archiving knowledge has an influence in the way that we learn, but also most importantly, try to explore ways that are non-linear and more spontaneous, and that has a sense of serendipity and discovery. Libraries have a lot of problems, I would say, but one of the 2 main problems are the problem of space and order. And as long as humans have existed, we have tried to organize the knowledge that we have. The image that you see on the left is from 1751. It's called The Tree of the Dorian D'Alembert. It was one of the first maps of human knowledge. As you can see, it's quite rigid, yet very organized in comparison to the one on the right, which is very organic. And these are the very first sort of like human knowledge graphic schemas that have been there to inspire. And nowadays there's a lot of different sort of like organization. There is the Dewey Decimal that probably all of you are familiar with, Library of Converse. There's Metis that is used for children libraries that is a bit more flexible. It encourages sort of like this sense of discovery. But through my research, I also found, which this is just small part of the research, I would say, 4 other libraries that also sort of have their own system that is more so the classification system is more open, that sort of promotes the sense of discovery through basically different ways of browsing. One library, for example, in Tel Aviv, encourages the readers to put sort of like these stickers that have colors based on their emotions. So the next person who would pick the book would sort of know how the previous person felt while reading the book. So I felt these are really interesting ways that sort of like this, like lets the users be part of the whole system. And through that, I became very interested about this idea of serendipity and what is it that that's sort of like when you go in a library, that you are looking for something, but you may find something else. So let's say you're here, looking through the shelves. Randomly, you may sort of like come across other books that you weren't even looking. And serendipity principle is usually a familiar one. It usually happens when you're trying to look at the bookshelves and look through a collection of books, but you may find another thing that you like. So I went through sort of like designing for serendipity, different scenarios that could be used. The focus of this part of my talk is basically the dust jackets that I created. Because when you're sort of like browsing on a shelf, this is the visual schema that you see, and we're all visual readers. So there is, the books with different heights. We have the titles, the information of the book, and then we have the tags, the library tags. These are the most sort of like visible things that you see. So one of the processes that I did, I went through a process of reduction where I actually remove all the textual information. It was a case study based on just the images. And what does that mean when there is a sense of mystery and being unknown? And with that, I also created like sort of other scenarios with the relationship between the known and unknown, and sort of like highlighting some of the books that haven't been read over like, let's say 5 years or 3 years, looking up the library's archive. And it's really interesting because from the books, the only thing that we really see is that spine, and it's a really, really thin area to be focusing on. And it's limiting, but yet there is a lot of potential to be basically creating systems as designers. I also went through another sort of like hypothetical system of using marbles not as decoratives, but as sort of like system that functions based on criteria of form and color and contrast. Similarly, through typography and through typography. Another scenario that was created was through the bookmark. I'm sort of like inspired by the bookmark that we do as individuals. And I created an indexing system that sort of like lets the users sort of like bookmark an area or a page that they found interesting to keep this communication going between the previous user to the next user. These are just more of sort of like the indexing visuals. So in total, I created 6 different scenarios. Here, this one is based on image and text ratio that it could be used for children's libraries. That's technically a lot of times you just want to know what is the amount of text information versus image information based on the age of the child. These are, the total 6 different scenarios. And thank you.
Thank you, Elham. Thank you, everyone. It was great. It was awesome. So much packed in only 20 minutes. Incredible. So, with the short amount of time that we have, I wanted to ask questions from each of you. First, I'm going to ask a question from Pouya. I know, Pouya, you invited Golnar and Elham because they contributed to the last issue of Amalgam Journal. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about Amalgam and what it's all about, and just let us know.
Sure. Yeah, so Amalgam is basically it's a graphic design or typography journal, but it has a little bit of a more kind of expansive perspective on typography, less sort of kind of focus on necessarily micro sort of issues around typography, but but it's kind of trying to constantly make connections and expand our kind of conversations around typography. So so I thought the two contributors, Golnar and Elham, both had really interesting kind of approach to typography in that, you know, one kind of, in the case of Golnar, you know, she is an artist, but she works with language, she works with typography. And so it's kind of like a slightly different perspective than, you know, if you would say, like, for instance, a designer or a typographer would assume. And then similar, or I would say similarly in that sense, Elham is, you know, she is a designer, but also a researcher, and she also has a kind of very unique perspective on what it means to kind of work with language, but in the context, a very specific context, being the library. So what's the role of language, and you know, because books, when you're talking about books, you're specifically talking about language and also the written word. So again, like, she has this kind of, again, maybe not super direct or kind of focuses specifically on typography, but maybe like a more expansive. But I would say that amalgam is kind of the intention behind it is to kind of bring together all these, you know, all that is in the periphery of the field, not necessarily like, I mean, there are obviously type designers that are also involved in each issue, but also there are people that are artists or linguists, not necessarily even typographers. If that answered the question.
Yeah, thank you. So I also have a question. It's actually a shared question, but I want to direct it to both of you, Golnar and Elham. What grabbed my attention about both of your works was that you both, as a system designer, I'm just really fascinated by systems and patterns and parameters. And I noticed you both designed like you had a systematic approach to your design or to your artistic approach. So I just was curious personally. I wanted to know if your background, like for example, for you, Golnar, your background in architecture plays a role in this, or I'm just, I'm not sure even, Elham, about you. Why was it something specific that inspired you to look at it systematically? Just want to generally know about that.
Should I go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I feel like when I entered architecture school, which was a very intuitive move, I didn't do much research. I just knew a lot of architects and was surrounded by them. You know, I had a very emotional approach. I came from painting, and the system in architecture, because it shows you and teaches you how to organize through systems, was so refreshing. And also, I'm very much into repetition and pattern, just innately. And so, putting all those things together, it's my go-to for trying to objectively organize and look at the world. And also, I do that with my own archive of kind of family history and all the contents that I deal with is by giving it system and kind of trying to stick to kind of a serial way of working to take too much control away and allowing that concept to organize itself. So kind of giving it parameters. Yeah, love all that stuff.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Thanks.
How about you,
Golnar.
Elham?
I think for me also, yeah, I think it comes from the way I actually work, because I am a very like process oriented person. And I think then that's how I also try to give myself parameters and you know, that's I think where the systems also comes from. Otherwise, because I am a person who can, you know, just go all around and reach nothing. So I think that's why I try to sort of like have these you know, different ways of working, because, and also another thing is what was interesting about this topic is that I say it's ongoing and I say it's a process because there is really not an end to it. And I think there's a lot of different alternative ways that you could do this. You know, within each system, there could be multiple systems that could be created. So yeah, I think it's just a part of how I work, I think.
Love it. Thank you so much. It was like really fascinating, all of you guys. I love that. Like really enjoy going through like your site, looking at each project, even like your personal references, Golnar. I was really fascinated how you translated all those emotions and the letters and everything. It was really fascinating. Thank you. So with that, I think we can close this session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, speakers. Thank you, audience and Typographics. It was really great. And see you next time. So right now, we would like to show you a few more typographic animations from our sponsors that were made just for this year's conference.
Get a font in your inbox every single month. Font of the month.
Thanks, Pegah, for bringing together these great speakers. You're such an incredible, elegant, warm host, and it was amazing content. And thanks to all of you in the audience, and to each one of our speakers and sponsors, and to Cooper Union for continuing to produce this outstanding festival. An incredible team at Cooper is working behind the scenes to bring this content to you. We're back here on Thursday, June 10th, for another incredible day of talks curated by Troy Linster. So we'll see you then, and just do some type in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.